Good morning, everybody.
Morning. Morning.
Morning.
Ta-da.
Well, we're 9:01, so I think we should make a start. So good morning, everybody. Bore da bawb. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much for joining us for this next session in our series of events to highlight the importance of inclusion and diversity in the workplace. It's a joint event between HPMA Cymru and Legal and Risk Services, and obviously the event is very well timed to coincide with Pride Month. I'm Daniela Mahapatra, Deputy Director of Legal and Risk Services, and this is my colleague Sioned Eirig, who heads up our employment team at Legal and Risk Services. We're both specialist employment lawyers and work very closely with our HR community across the NHS in Wales. And we are both members of the HPMA Cymru committee.
We're absolutely delighted to introduce you to our speaker for today, Nigel Owens, MBE. Whilst he needs no introduction, you might know that Nigel is the most capped referee in the history of rugby, with one of the most respected voices in the game. Off the pitch, he's held an equally high standing for his role within the LGBTQ community, being open about his struggles with depression and his work with social charities such as Bullies Out. A key figure of rugby union, Nigel has been presiding over matches since 1987, but Nigel's influence off the pitch has been equally notable, particularly his advocacy for equality and mental health awareness. And Nigel is one of the first in the male-dominated sports history to come out as openly gay. Nigel has received various accolades, including Stonewall's Gay Sports Personality of the Year 2007 and Gay Sports Personality of the Decade in 2013. In 2016, Nigel was appointed a member of the Order of the British Empire for services to sport.
So before we ask Nigel about his career and his achievements, just a reminder that you can submit questions via the chat function, and Sioned and I will keep an eye on those, and we'll ask those the questions that we have time for. And Nigel, just so that you're aware, in terms of our audience, this will be predominantly HR staff, advised managers and staff across the NHS in Wales on tricky issues and to drive positive change through partnership working and policy development. And I imagine we have quite a few rugby fans on the call as well. So feeling safe to be your authentic self at work is obviously a key theme for us, as well as understanding and supporting each other with mental health issues. And it's set against that backdrop that we'll now hand over to you, Nigel, and ask you to tell us about your early life and the challenges you faced before entering the world of professional refereeing.
Thank you. Diolch yn fawr. Good morning, everybody. Daniela and Sioned, thanks very much for your kind words and your introduction. I could have sat here and listened to you speak all day. I thought we were going to for a minute, the way you're going on. Anyway, listen, good morning to everybody. And what I'll do then, I suppose, before we sort of move on to the question and answer session, and please feel free to ask any questions you want. Nothing at all is off limits. Bear in mind, a few of the answers may well be off the record. But before we get to that, and before maybe we divulge a bit more into being able to take yourself to work, consistency, equality, diversity, inclusion, and what creates a good environment to work in, an environment that people can be challenged for change. I think it's important we sort of have maybe a discussion about the background of it. And the background of my upbringing and some of the difficulties and adversity I had to deal with before I was actually able to then later on take myself to work and the benefits of that. And the reason why I'd like to take you back to the beginning, I guess, and talk a little bit about my upbringing, where I was brought up, how I was brought up, is the fact because a lot of people will tell you that life is what you make it. And I suppose there comes a time in your life where that becomes quite relevant and quite true. But I'm a firm believer before you get to that stage in your life, that life will have made you, or certainly will have contributed hugely to who you are today. Now, there's always exceptions to the norm. People change, influences around us when we're older, maybe new directives, new laws come in everyday life, in workplace, which change us, which contributes to change. Sometimes for some, it's a reluctant change, but things do change us and we have to change the way we are. But I'm a firm believer that a lot of your upbringing and the influences around you will contribute hugely to who you are today. If you just think for a minute, maybe how many people tell you that you're very like your mum and dad or your parent or your guardian because of the huge influence on people like that or other people in your lives. And what I mean by that is the way you're brought up, where you're brought up as well, society, time you are actually brought up within. You know, that what your mum or dad or parent or guardian teaches you the rights and wrong, to say those little words of please and thank you, the value of respect, to respect your older elders, the community you're brought up within, the school you go to, teachers in the school, neighbours living next door to you, family members, the friends you hang around with, sporting clubs that you may participate in, coaches, teammates in that sporting environment. A lot of this, when you're growing up as a young person, will hugely influence you, the language you hear about you every day at home. And I was brought up in a very old-fashioned way, back in the 70s here in rural West Wales, in a small village called Mynydd Cerrig, which is in the heart of the Gwendraeth Valley. And I was brought up in this small village in rural West Wales, as I said, back in the 70s. And if you want to imagine for a minute what it was like being brought up in West Wales here in the 1970s, then come here now, because nothing's changed here. I was an only child, brought up on a council estate, very working class community, working class family. My dad was a coal miner and then worked in the limestone quarry in the village as well, and the neighbouring village, when the sort of mines started closing back in the 80s. And my mum then, after I started school, my mum worked a couple of hours in the school canteen as a cook. I couldn't speak English until I was around probably about 8 years of age. I started conversing in English because pretty much everybody living in the village were fluent Welsh speaking, first language. And I sort of taught English when I started school, and only started using English as a language pretty much when some non-Welsh speaking families moved into the village when I was about 7 or 8 years of age. In the primary school I went to, there were only 14 of us in the whole school. 2 classes, 2 teachers. And then I left the school and I went to the Gwendraeth Grammar School because I was the last year to try the old LEM+. And if you passed the LEM+, you'd have your education through the grammar school system. If you failed it, you went to a secondary school, a secondary mod school. How the hell I passed my LEM+, I don't know, but anyway, I did. And I went to the Gwendraeth Grammar School. So I went from a small school of 14 pupils, the only pupil leaving that year to go to the Gwendraeth School, to a school now of 1,200 pupils, knowing nobody there on that first day. It's a pretty daunting experience. So very similar maybe to imagine somebody coming into your industry, knowing nobody there on that first day, what it feels like for them, how you make them feel part of the working community, part of your workplace, of your office, of your place of work, making them feel welcome. So it's a very similar experience, really. So I went to the Gwendraeth School knowing nobody there. I had a couple of cousins older than me in school, but nobody in the same year as me. And after being in school for a couple of weeks, and maybe what contributed to this was the fact that because I knew nobody there, it sort of, you're quite quiet, quite shy, getting to know people. And maybe then somebody saw that as an opportunity to bully me. And after being in school for a couple of weeks, I was, for no apparent reason, I was bullied by an individual. Now, if any of you have experienced being bullied, particularly as a young person, but we must also remember that older people are bullied as well, or sometimes peer pressure, there's not much difference between the both. You feel a sense of weakness. You feel, pardon me, scared, alone, vulnerable, where you start believing actually that the issues that are causing the bullying are actually issues that are your own fault, where most of the occasions, if not all the occasions, they are not. The issues tend to be with the bully themselves, and they tend to take it out on people that they feel that they can. And it affects your life, because I would do anything to avoid going to school. So I would lie to my mum and dad pretending I was sick, to such an extent that they would get so worried about me, they'd ring the doctor to come out, and then I would lie my symptoms to the doctor. That's the extent I went to avoid being in the same situation as a bully. It was affecting my well-being, mentally and physically, and also it was affecting my education, and also my ability to mix with people, because I wasn't going to school, wasn't playing team sports with my friends and stuff, because I would do anything to avoid being in the situation. And then if I had to go to school, I'd become truant, where I would spend a lot of time on my own, or sometimes you'd be truant with an older group of boys, and you were then bullied or peer pressured by them into stealing things from the local shop at 11, 12 years of age, drinking cans of beer. So you were going down a road and doing things that you would have never been on if it wasn't for the situation of the bullying. So bullying does actually change people's lives and can also ruin people's lives. And because you feel a sense of weakness and you feel ashamed, you feel alone, it's very difficult to ask for help and to open up about these struggles. And that's why a lot of people who are being bullied tend to keep it to themselves. And then the bullying stopped, just by pure chance, because I went to school one day and the bully picked on me, and a couple of my friends saw this happening for the first time, and they stood up for me. And one of the bullies, one of my friends gave the bully a right hook and put him on his ass in the classroom, which gave me great pleasure. And that was the end of the bullying then. Now, just in case we have somebody here who says that I'm condoning violence, somebody actually did when I was doing this talk before, I don't condone violence in any shape or forms. But if I was a teacher in that school, there's only one person that I'd be having a stirred word with, and that was the bullying, to tell him that it's not right. And obviously maybe a quiet word with the guy who stood up for him. Listen, that may be not the best way to deal with it, but it was dealt with. That then changed the course of my life. The grammar schools were being phased out back in the early 80s, and you had a choice of doing your education through the language of Welsh or through the medium of English. So I went to the Welsh-speaking school in Mysyrorfa with my group of friends, and school's what it should be like. Of course, hugely important that you get the opportunity to be educated, but also as well an opportunity to grow as a young person, to participate in different school activities, being on the stage for the first time pretty much in the school Eisteddfod, doing drama in school, playing rugby for the first time with your mates. And it was in Mysyrorfa School, which is here in the Gwyndraeth Valley in West Wales, that my refereeing career started at 16 years of age. Because when I was 16 years of age in school, my ambition was not to become a referee, let alone an international referee. My ambition in school at 16 years of age was a simple one. All I ever wanted to do was to appear live on the Antiques Roadshow. That's all I wanted to do. And just for the simple reason that I could tell some lovely old lady, do you know how much that is worth, love? Fuck all. Not a penny. But we won't go into that now. I then left school and I went to work on a farm as a farmhand. And I worked on the farm for a couple of years before going back to school to work as a school technician and a youth worker as well, until around December 2001. So I worked there for about 13 years before I then started my job as a professional rugby referee with the Welsh Rugby Union, in a role that I'm still currently doing till the end of this month, when I will hang up the whistle for good. After going back to school to work, I was about 19 years of age. My life changed. And a lot of this difficulty was of a lot to do with my upbringing. As I said, I was brought up in an old-fashioned way, went to Sunday school, went to chapel, in a small, close-knit community where things are very different to life in the big cities, still are. Not that there's nothing wrong with that, mind, in one way or the other. I was told by my mum, like I suppose many of us were, or sometimes maybe your dads, that when you get older, you'll have a girlfriend, and then after you get a girlfriend, you'll get married. And then after you get married, you get children. And then after you get children, you become a grandparent, and that's the way the world keeps on going round. And here I was at 19 years of age. I had a girlfriend at the time, but on occasions, and only on occasions, I was finding myself attracted to men. And this was something totally alien, something I'd never experienced before, and something I certainly knew nothing about, and becoming somebody that I certainly didn't want to be. And a lot of this was to do with the environment I was brought up in at the time, because, and it's probably very similar today, but not to the extent it was back then. But if you think for a minute, and it's even more so back then than today, whenever you hear the word gay, homo, puff, faggot, gay boy, whenever you hear these words, it's never to describe something positive or something that somebody likes. Even my godchildren, even my little cousin who's over here often, sometimes they tell me, one of them said a couple of weeks ago, we went for a Nando's, and he said, I don't want to go to school tomorrow. Can I help you on the farm? I said, no, you've got to go to school. He's only, 14? He said, no, you've got to go to school, man. He said, I don't want to go to school. I don't like school. It's gay. I said, right, okay. Now, what do you mean by that, Nanette? Oh, well, nothing. I just don't like school. Yes, I know. But so if one of your friends now is gay, and you've just said, I don't like school, it's gay, he's going to think you're not going to like him. Oh, yeah, but that's not true. You know that's not true. I said, I know, but that's what he'll be thinking. So sometimes it's educating people. Because how many people use those words? Even today, or, they played like a bunch of puffs. Not they don't mean it. Sometimes people don't mean anything nasty by it, but they just a force of habit, which was probably the era they were brought up within. So educating people about these words, not necessarily calling them out and reporting them to HR that they've been homophobic, but just saying, hang on now, when you use these words like this, somebody who's struggling with their sexuality will automatically think maybe that you don't like them because you describe something. You're not going to come in here and say, oh, they played brilliantly yesterday. They played like a bunch of puffs. It'll always be to describe something negative. So it's educating people, having those conversations, and not be afraid to have those conversations. And because a lot of this language back then, even more so than today, I thought that nobody's going to like me because I was gay. Even my mum and dad, my friends, my uncle, my auntie, my grandparents, nobody would like me because nobody liked gay people because of this language I was hearing. And because of my upbringing in that small community, I never knew of a gay person in person. So the only gay people I knew of were some of the very camp characters that are on some of the sitcoms on TV back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and still till today. So I'm sitting there watching these TV programs with family members, sometimes with friends, thinking to myself, but if that is a gay person, I can't be like that. I don't want to be like that. I'm not like that. I play rugby, I referee. And then also hearing this language around me, bloody puffs, it's wrong, shouldn't be on television, it's not right. Thinking to myself, oh my God, I certainly don't want to be gay because I don't want people to talk about me like this and not like me. I then started suffering from mental health issues then because of this worry. And I started becoming quite reclusive, spending a lot of time on my own, avoiding being in situations where I would hear these words used, thinking, oh my God, do they know something? And I started drinking a lot to deal with these mental health issues, with the depression. I started comfort eating a lot, I put a lot of weight on. So I became very, very overweight. I was obese. And I didn't like the image I was seeing myself in the mirror. So I went about it the wrong way, but I started losing weight by becoming bulimic. And I started suffering from the eating disorder, bulimia, where pretty much after everything I would eat, I would bring it all back up. This would be sometimes 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times a day in, day out, week after week, month after month, years after years. I still suffer from bulimia today, but not to the extent I did back then, and it hasn't risen its head now for about nearly 18 months. I then became very thin, lost a lot of weight, became very pale, didn't look well, didn't feel well. So I started going to the gym because I wanted to put a bit of weight on. I wanted to have a body that I was confident in. And I started weight training and I started using steroids. So by the time I was 25 years of age, I was in a pretty bad place. The mental health issues and the depressions were getting worse. The suicidal thoughts were getting more frequent and stronger. I was bulimic and I was hooked on steroids. And I then read in a article in a column in a newspaper magazine that somebody had written, and some people still believe this today, and still write about these things today, had written an article that being gay was not only morally wrong, but it was also an illness that you could and should be cured from. And the way that you were to be cured was you were to be chemically castrated. So as a young person who was fighting against who I was becoming, and a lot of this was to do with the environment and the language around me, not being able to be myself, afraid of being myself, I read this and thought, oh, I can get better. So I made an appointment with my doctor and I said, look, I think I'm gay. I don't want to be gay. And I've read that if I get chemically castrated, I can get better. And the doctor said, look, Nigel, it doesn't work like that. He said, you are who you are. I can put you in touch with somebody to talk about this. He said, but that is not your answer. So I left the doctor's surgery in a far worse state than I'd gone in there. My out, I guess, my lifeline had been taken away from me. And then the next few weeks were absolutely hell. I just went darker and darker and darker into this dark, dark hole. The suicidal thoughts became stronger and stronger. And then I thought, that's it. There's only one way out now. And then one evening, I did something that I will regret for the rest of my life. Something that I will have to live with for the rest of my life. I left a note from my mum and dad. I didn't tell them why. I just left a note and said that I was going to end my life. And I'll never forgive myself for what I put my mum and dad through when they got up that morning and read the note and thought they were never going to see their only child ever again. I just can't begin to imagine what they must have been going through. And not just then, but probably the years of anguish after that, worrying, is it going to happen again? And I left the house in the early hours of the morning with a couple of boxes of tablets, a bottle of whiskey, and because I was to work on a farm, I had a gun in the house and I loaded the gun. And I left the house and I walked around where I was still living at home at the time, pretty much looking at everything for the last time, I guess. And what I actually took to end my life ended up saving me, because I overdosed on the tablets and I slipped into a coma. I drank the whiskey, and I have no doubt that if that hadn't happened, I would have pulled the trigger of the gun. My mum and dad rang the police. They sent the police helicopter out searching for me, and family and friends, and I got airlifted then to West Wales General Hospital in Carmarthen, where I spent a couple of days in intensive care and then a sort of week or so in hospital. And after coming out of intensive care, the doctor came around and said, look, Nigel, you're a very, very lucky young man. He said, another 30 minutes or so and it could have been too late to save your life. And people came to visit, people asking why, still didn't tell anybody anything. And then after visiting hours came to a close, people left. My mum and dad left, but my mum came back, and she came into the room and she sat on the end of the bed and she said to me, if you ever do anything like that again, then you may as well take me and your dad with you, because we don't want to carry on living our life without you in it. And that's all she said. And she left. And I started crying to myself, and I said to myself that this is who I am. I have no choice. There are many things in life we can choose. You can choose where you live, where you work, what your values are, your moral compass is, who you marry, what car you drive, what sport you follow. Many, many things in life we can choose. But our sexuality is not one of them. That was the biggest challenge of my life, was accepting who I truly was. Refereeing the World Cup final back in 2015 between Australia and New Zealand in Twickenham, the biggest game in world rugby, which only happens once every 4 years. The pressure on you, the challenge of refereeing that match is huge. But it was nothing compared to the challenge of accepting who I truly was, and that I had issues that I had to deal with. And that, I believe, is the biggest challenge you'll come across in life, is accepting that you are struggling. Whatever causing those struggling, whatever's triggering those mental health issues or those anxieties, whatever it may be, until you accept that there are issues you need to deal with, then there's no way you can go on to the next stage of what are you going to do about it. Whether it be worrying about pressure in work, job security, financial worries, relationships at home, worrying about your children going to school, going to university, whatever those worries are, unless you accept that there are issues you are struggling with or there are worries you need to address, then you can't move on to do anything about it. And even though I accepted who I was, I still carried on living that lie because I was still afraid of people finding out who I was and what they would say. Because there was nobody out in the macho world of rugby. So I didn't know, can I actually be myself in work? And this was affecting my performance because unless you're happy within yourself and allowed to be yourself, there's no way you can be the best at what you can be. So imagine you're at home hiding or living a lie about something. You can never be happy within that home environment. You can never get the best out of it. If you've got to go to work every day and hide something and worry about people finding something out, whatever it may be, you can't be yourself. And if you're not enjoying that and enjoying in the workplace, there's no way you're going to give it your best either. A little bit extra that you need to be the best or to give your best requires you actually go into work and enjoying what you're doing. Because unless you enjoy what you're doing, you're not going to give it your best. And because I was not able to be myself, and that worry in the back of my mind, I wasn't enjoying what I was doing. It was affecting my performances. So I did my first international match in 2005, Japan against Ireland out in Osaka, and I'd also done Scotland and Barbarians up in Aberdeen. And I didn't referee the two games very well. And the referee manager rang up and he said, look, Nigel, I have 17 international matches to appoint in the next international window, and I have 18 international referees. So one referee is going to miss out. And that one referee is going to be you because your performances weren't to the standard we expect of an international referee. And I knew they weren't. And I knew why. Because in the back of my mind was this constant fear of being found out, living that lie every day. And I thought, that's it. That's my job. That's my career gone. And about 2 weeks later, he rang back and he said, look, Argentina have arranged to play Samoa in an extra game. We are going to appoint you to that game. But you need to understand, he said, that unless you perform to the standard we expect of an international referee, then you won't be considered to referee a match again. So I thought, right, I've got the best part of 3 months to prepare for this last chance. Physically, I was fit. Mentally, I was still struggling, still having to live that lie every day. And I thought to myself, what do I need to do? What do I need to do that when I go to Argentina, that I'm in a situation where I can enjoy what I'm doing and give it my best? And then if I'm not good enough, it's just because I'm just not good enough for this level. And there's no other excuses. So I thought, right, I can't carry on living this lie anymore. So I went to, there's two things I had to do. I had to first of all tell my mum. So I went to tell my mum. It took me the best part of 3.5 hours to tell my mum that one word, I was gay. And she said to me, Nigel, nothing changes. We both cried. She said, you're my son and I will love you exactly the same. But you need to understand, she said, from now on, your life may be very different and at times it'll probably be difficult. And she was right. I let her tell my dad. It took a couple of days, but nothing changed between me and my dad. We're still the best of friends today. He comes down to help me on the farm. He's 86 years of age now, and my mum passed away 14 years ago now. But then I needed to find out, can I actually be myself in rugby? Because there was nobody out. So I didn't know how the rugby world would react. So I went to see my line manager, Bob M, and I said, look, Bob, I got something to tell you, and I need to find out that if I do come out as gay, am I going to be able to carry on with doing my job as a referee? And that is a choice that none of us should have to make. None of us should have to carry on living a lie every day so we can keep our job or enjoy our work. And it came down to to a choice basically then of, if he's going to say no, I'm going to have to make a choice of, right, do I give up my refereeing to live my life, or do I carry on living this lie so I can carry on with my refereeing? And thankfully he said, Nigel, look, you have nothing to worry about. He said, myself and the Welsh Rugby Union, we will support you 100%, and they did, and they still do today. I went to Argentina a different person. The weight of the world had been taken off my shoulders. And I'm pretty sure some of you will have experienced this. Or if you haven't, this is what it's like. If you are struggling with something, whatever, mental health issues, worrying about something, whatever it is, when you're feeling sort of down every day, heavy-footed, you know, you're not able to be yourself and enjoy. You feel the weight of the world on your shoulder, the constant fear every day. That's what it was like, day in, day out, from the best part of about 12 years, from about the age of, well, 13, from about 19, 20 years of age till I was about 32 years of age. It was a constant feeling down every day. And when I was able to be myself, that it disappeared. That weight on my shoulders had gone. It was an unbelievable feeling. I went to Argentina a different person. I was able to be myself. I wasn't shouting it from the rooftops, but if anybody asked, I didn't have to lie anymore. And as I walked out on that field that day, I did something for the first time ever, but I've done it in every single game I've refereed since. As I walked out on that field, knowing that this was my last chance, as I walked behind the two teams and crossed the white of the touchline, I said to myself, don't fuck it up. And I didn't. The game went well. I had a great review from the performance reviewer. And from that game on, I've gone on, as was mentioned earlier, to referee 100 international matches, a World Cup final, a record 7 European finals, a record 6 Pro 14 finals. I wouldn't have been able to achieve any of that if I hadn't accepted who I was, and just as importantly, if I hadn't been allowed to be who I truly am. Because it shouldn't matter who you are. It shouldn't matter what country you come from, what the color of your skin is, your sexual orientation, or your religious beliefs. None of that should matter one bit. All that should matter is that if you were a decent human being, that you would be treated the same. No better, no worse. Just the same as everybody else. Not only in everyday life, but in whatever workplace you choose to participate in. One of the most important fundamental values and ethos of rugby union as a sport is that value of respect. And if there's one thing that today's society lacks, and that is respect. Rugby union, in my humble opinion, upholds the tradition and value of respect better than any other sport in the world. And if it wasn't for the great sport that rugby is, but more important than that, the people in the sport, then I wouldn't be able to be who I am today. And if I was not able to be who I am today, then there was no way I'd have been able to achieve my career in my work as a referee. Now, we don't live in a perfect world. And I'm afraid to tell you, we never will. You can never be a perfect person. I could never go out and referee a perfect game of rugby. No, I came close a few times, but I never managed it. You can never create a perfect work environment. So don't try, because if you do, you'll come up short. So don't try to be perfect, but be good. Be a good person. Create an environment or a workplace that is a good place to work in, with people that are respected, no matter how different they are to others in that workplace. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. We live in a time where political correctness sometimes has gone to the extreme, where a little bit of common sense and empathy and conversation sometimes is lacking. Now, it's hugely important that political correctness has played a huge part in equality, diversity, inclusion, making our work, our life, in everyday life, a better place to live in. We must never lose that. We must continue to do that. But when it goes to the extreme where people are afraid to have a joke and a laugh in case somebody looks for a reason to be offended, compared to somebody who actually is being offensive, that's when we are not able to create an environment where people feel they can be themselves. Because any extremism, whether it be to the left or to the right, brings challenges. So don't try to be perfect, try to be good. And let me leave you with this thought. Not only do we have a responsibility in what we say or what we do, we sometimes have more of a one if we stand by and we say or do nothing. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for that talk, Nigel, and thank you for speaking so eloquently and honestly about your life and the challenges that you've had. I can see lots of claps and lots of nice messages in the chat, and I know that there'll be people on this call, well, all of us will be affected by what you've talked about, and certainly there'll be people on this call who this might even just change their life from listening to what you've said. So thank you so much for joining us to talk and for speaking so honestly. We have a few questions that are for you right now, but just a reminder to the audience, if you've got any questions, please put them in the chat and we'll pick them up and ask them before we finish at around 10 o'clock. So I'll just pass over to Sinead, who has the first question.
You said don't try to create the perfect work environment, but how can we, especially in the NHS, support people to feel safe in the workplace? Is it enough to say the right things on posters and policies, or is it more than that?
I think, like, yes, you need. The problem with policies is it's a bit like refereeing a game of rugby, and a bit like everyday life where things are not in black and white. There's a lot of grey, and sometimes when you put something into policy or into law, it's unless you have the ability then to have that sort of empathy and understand. So let me give you an example. When I said earlier that when I was in work, and one of the guys came into work, one of my best friends, and he said, "Did you see the Dragons play yesterday? They played like a bloody bunch of pups. They were useless." And the conversation then, somebody said, "You can't say that." And he said, "What did I say?" And he said, "No, I didn't mean it like that." And I said, "Look, I know you didn't mean it like that, but what you described," I said, "is you described somebody, or describe something now that, so basically anybody who's gay or is a puff, they're going to be used as a sport." That's what you basically said. You're not going to come in here next week and say the Dragons played brilliantly, they were like a bunch of puffs. You're conveying something negative. So it is having the conversation around that. And I said, "Do you know what? I didn't think of it like that." Because it's we are creatures of habit. That's what I said. When you remember people who, when you're brought up in the 50s, 60s, 70s, you're brought up in a very different environment than you are today. So older people say, my dad says things, I'm thinking, "Oh my God, Dad, you can't say that. He has got a nasty bone in his body." But so sometimes you need then to have conversations with people. So a policy needs the ability then to be able to deal with the grey, have the conversations. And if you create, I think, some things are non-negotiable. When I refereed a game of rugby, there were some things that are non-negotiable. Other things you had to take into account what happened, or what was said, why it happened, how did it happen, and then you base your decision on that. But the most important thing, that the backbone of all that is that value of respect, that people are able to feel that they are respected and going to be treated the same. Now, there will be a time when people will need to be treated differently, and that is equal access. And there's a difference between equal access and unconscious bias, which is something I don't believe in. So, for example, I should never have been appointed to referee the World Cup final because I was a gay person. It'll look good. We'll tick a box. We'll have the first major world tournament with a openly gay official. It will be brilliant for our HR team, it'll be brilliant for our rugby diversity message. No, I should be repping the World Cup because I am the best. The environment should be that it allows me to be the best and get the same support as everybody else. So that's what you need to do. You can put up all the policies and all the posters. And again, there's sometimes that, look, I don't really agree with this, but we have to put it up. So what you need is an environment or a workplace that you have that respect and people feel they can be themselves, that they can go to work and not worry about being judged because somebody could be suffering with mental health issues for whatever reason it is, and they feel they're not going to go to work and be belittled or feel, oh, we can never give this person promotion because we don't know if the mental health will affect them in years. So that is the environment you need to create, that people feel that. So, a poster on the wall will convey a clear message, but it's how you apply it then and how you deal with issues when they arise. And that's the most important thing, I believe. And as I said, it's not easy, but there are people out there who will look for a reason to be offended rather than generally being offended. And that's what we need to have a little bit of common sense. And this is a true story. I went with a bunch of friends quite a few years ago now, and we were queuing in to do a club. And they said, Nigel, let's go to the front of the queue, we'll go in. I said, no, I'm not going to go to the front of the queue. I'm going to go in. If they tell us to come in, we'll go in, but I'm not going to go to the front of the queue and tell them, look, I'm Nigel Owens, I want to go in, because probably they'll send me to the back. One of the people who were with me was a gay person. He went to the front of the queue and basically said, look, unless you let me in, I'm going to say that you said something homophobic about me. And we fell out and we haven't really spoken much since. So there are people out there, unfortunately, who will use things in that context as well. So you need to have an open mind as well. But as I said, if you have that respect in the workplace and the policy of having conversations, don't be afraid to have the difficult conversations and sometimes ask, hang on, now, what do you mean by that? And when they explain, well, this is what I meant. Okay, I understand what you were trying to say, but maybe next time say it in a different way so that somebody may not think it is offensive.
Diolch, Nigel. The chat is going a bit mad, so it's a bit difficult to keep a track on it. But Darren's asked, how do you feel about being a role model and being able to inspire others on and off the field through your own experiences in life?
Well, thanks, Darren. Look, I didn't come out to be a role model, and I certainly didn't go out there to think that I want to be a role model. And basically, what happened is I sort of, my autobiography Halftime came out, and my story was pretty much in that because I said to the publisher, look, I can't sort of not discuss my personal life. It's going to be out there for people to read, but I can't do a book and people knowing that I've been through difficult times and thinking, well, why hasn't he mentioned this? So it had to be an honest account of my life. And then after that, people got in touch and said they found it really helpful. And then people asked me to go and do talks like this. And then just by being myself, I suppose a lot of people have said that it's helped. So then I realized then, and people have said to me that you are a role model. And so I if I was to say, well, I don't think I am a role model, then I'd be lying, because people tell me that. So I assume I am. And that does mean a lot to me. I think it's very... Nobody should be forced to be a role model. If somebody wants to sort of get on with their own lives and not discuss it in public, whoever they are, then that should be respected. But for me, knowing that it does help people, so it is something that I sort of am proud of, I guess. But I do share that experiences because I know it does help people. But I didn't start out to do that. It sort of grew and where we are today, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's not just, you see, and this is important for you in the workplace. It's not yes, you learn from the things that people have done well. So imagine you're an apprentice or you're a trainee or you're somebody new or there's somebody much more experienced than you in your workplace or whatever you're doing, and you'll ask them questions, ask them for help, ask them for advice. You not only learn from the good things that they do, you'll probably learn more from the mistakes that they made over the years. So that's why I think not only sharing your good experiences, but sharing those difficult conversations or difficult experiences help people as well, whether it be personally or in the workplace.
Thank you. That's brilliant. There's a question in the chat from Sally, and I think it's something on everybody's lips, really. Did you ever make it onto the Antiques Roadshow?
Not yet, no. Still an ambition to do that. Oh, can you imagine that? Oh, bloody hell.
We'll start a Twitter campaign.
Maybe
Yes.
they'd have Ofcom complaints then.
Catherine's asking, how do you achieve self-belief and the confidence to be who you are when life and people knock you back?
That's a very good question, Catherine. Probably a lot to do with those experiences. Now, listen, people say, would you change anything from what you've been through in your life? Well, yes, I would. I certainly wouldn't want to go through that again. And I certainly wouldn't want to put my mum and dad and friends and family through that difficult time again. And I wouldn't want to go through it myself. But certainly after being through it, it certainly has helped me become who I am today, to build up resilience. I suppose maybe showing that vulnerability, I guess, is something that I see as a strength, not as a weakness. And and a lot of that probably has helped me to deal. And I think as well, is you can't be a referee if you're not able to deal with the abuse that comes. Now, it's not nice. It doesn't mean that I like abuse and that I can deal with all the abuse. It does hurt you, but as a referee, there's something in you that enables you to deal with that, whether to block it out or park it out of the way or not let it affect you. And that's, or otherwise you just can't be a referee. So the things that I put in place, I sort of, sometimes you get abuse on social media, some horrible, horrible people out there. Well, the easy answer to that is the block button. You don't need people like that in your life or be able to. And people say, oh, that's childish, Nigel Owens blocked me. Well, so what? If you can't be respectful and be, if you don't agree with my refereeing or agree with my way of life, that's fine. But once you start using abusive language and being nasty about it, then off you go. So there are things I put in place. And also as well, one of the key things for me, I don't worry about things I can't control. So for example, many years ago, I used to worry about what the weather would be like if it was going to be refereeing on a Saturday. Because if the weather is really bad, the game is different and then it becomes more difficult to referee than when the weather is nice or sunny. I was in the week then worrying, oh, it's going to rain weekend. And I thought, Derek Bevan was my coach at the time, and he said to me, what the bloody hell are you worrying about the weather for? There's nothing you can do about that. Just worry about what you can do on Saturday. And so since then, I don't worry about things I can't control anymore, because there's nothing I can do about it. Now, yes, human nature will tell you, yes, if you're worrying about the weather, I need to cut hay at some point. And then I'm thinking, oh, the bloody weather's bad. And then you just, well, there's nothing I can do with it. So then you park it. And then sometimes again, you start thinking about the weather and then you park. So I've learned to sort of forget about, to park the things I can't control. That also has helped me as well to deal with things. Well, look, if there's some clown out there who doesn't like me for whatever reason, nothing I can do about it. So, I move on from it.
Thank you. Anthony's asked a follow-up question to that. So how would you affect change as an individual who may be Black, gay, with anxiety or neurodiverse, and your workplace is resistant to that change or understanding?
Well, it's about having conversations like this, isn't it? And, being strong enough then, I suppose, to stand up and have those conversations, and not just you, and that's what I said, not only do we have a responsibility in what we say or what we do, we have more of a one if we say nothing. So imagine you have a workplace where there is that sort of undercurrent of sort of feeling of racism there. You feel you're not being treated the same because the color of your skin is different. Well, I would assume that most of the people in that workplace would not be racist. So when you get most of those people standing up and not saying nothing, but standing up and saying, look, this is not acceptable here. This is not a work environment that I want to be part of. That then forces change. Some of that change is reluctant. People can't be homophobic or racist in public today. They can't. It's against the law. Some people are, but they just won't do it public. So there is that sort of reluctant acceptance still. So then it's about having that change. The more people that stand up against that type of workplace or type of individuals or group of people, then that then is where the change comes about. And not be afraid to challenge those changes. Look, hang on, this is not an environment that I feel is supporting people who are suffering with mental health issues. This needs to change. And then that needs to be challenged. And the more people that challenge that, then the change comes along, the change. And getting people to understand as well. You have to remember as well, mind, there are some old school people out there, aren't they? Their ways of life are different. Old style of managers, you know, old styles of refereeing different to today. I'm not saying that some of those old styles are wrong, you know, as long as they're not sort of homophobic or not racist, not biased. It doesn't mean that their own style is wrong, but sometimes a different style is better. So it's having those conversations, and that change sometimes comes along with changes in the environment, changes in society, changes in time as well. But I think the key thing for me is that you don't have people standing by and saying nothing when things are being done wrong. The more people that stand up to say to that that's how change happens, I feel.
Thank you, that's brilliant. And I hope you do get a chance to have a look in the chat at some point after this, Nigel, because there's so many lovely comments in there, and some really personal ones about family members who've come out and how they seem to have changed, and how they now think that that's probably because they're feeling free to be their authentic selves. So it's hopefully we'll get time to have a look at those, and if not, we can perhaps send you a copy of it. Another question then. If there are people on this call who are struggling to deal with something in their personal life, be it accepting their sexuality or worries about something else significant to them, what advice would you give them?
Sorry, I missed that. So say again.
If there are people on the call who are struggling to deal with something in their personal life, so perhaps their sexuality or something else significant to them, what advice would you give them?
Well, there's two parts to this, really, and also there's no one cup that fits all. But the key thing is, unless you have an environment where people feel that they can open up and talk about the struggles, it's going to be very difficult for them to do so. So you need the person himself to accept, self-acceptance, to take ownership and sort of say, I'm struggling here. But then to encourage them to open up and ask for help means that they know that they can. So if you have an environment that they feel they can't do that, I can't tell anybody in work about this, then they're going to bottle it up. So they're not going to open up with the struggles. So it goes hand in hand, really. Having an environment where they feel they can be themselves and can talk about the struggles will help them to open up about it. Also, as well, sometimes it's something personal. Sometimes somebody feels, even though the environment is... So, for example, if somebody said to me, oh, look, there's no way I can come out in rugby, I'd be going to them, why? Because... yes, you have individuals in rugby, you have individuals in all walks. There'll be individuals in your family that won't like you. But you can't tell me that you can't be yourself in rugby. So rugby is not homophobic. So you can't tell me that you can't come out because you fear rugby is going to be homophobic, because it's not. There may be an individual or people in there for whatever different reason. That's the same as that's in all walks of life. But you can't tell me that. So what is the issue there? So the issue is not the environment. The struggle here is with that person himself accepting who he is. So it goes hand in hand sometimes. If you have an environment that is accepting and the person is still struggling, then it's something that they have to sort of deal with themselves. But then if you have an environment that is people feel they can't be themselves, that's not going to help with the acceptance of the person themselves. So, you know, it goes pretty much hand in hand, really, and there's two ways. So create an environment, as I said, where people can feel respected and be themselves. That will help people who are struggling as well then.
Diolch, Nigel. Listening to your story, I feel like I've been through a range of emotions, and Tim has mentioned in the chat that your game management and humour has earned the respect of many. Was this a conscious decision to use humour in conveying your communications?
Not really, Tim, no, because I never went out in that field thinking, right, I want to be funny, or I'm going to be funny today, or I'm going to say something funny. Because when I came off the field, you'd have text messages, your mates or your TMO or assistant referees would say, "Oh, bloody hell, Nigel, so funny what you said today. People, it's gone viral on YouTube or Twitter." And I'm thinking, I say, "Well, what did I say?" And they tell me that, "God, really? Do people think that's funny?" Or sometimes they think, "Well, I don't remember saying that." Well, I do, but I didn't sort of think of it at the time. So I've never gone out in the field to be funny. I've just been out there and been myself, really. And, you know, I was on stage in Moneycarry Workingmen's Club doing stand-up comedy at 14 years of age, you know, before I became a referee. So humour has been a huge part of my life. My dad, my family, my community, we live in a very humorous sort of, you know, the Welsh humour is very unique, very similar to Irish humour as well. So it's who I am, I guess. So it's just part of me, really, you know.
Sorry, it takes a while to unmute. And the last question that we've got in the chat is, was there a reluctant acceptance in the farming community, as it's traditionally an older generation who are on farms?
There is no doubt. I haven't come across it myself, but what you tend to find is people won't tell you that they don't like you in your face anyway. And maybe there are people who sort of, I'm not going to speak. I don't want to sort of speak probably in the same place as him. And so there are people like that. There is no doubt. I know when I came out as a referee, a couple of people contacted the referee manager, referees themselves, and look, we don't want to be on the same game as Nigel. There were a couple of people that did that. I don't know who they are. I'd like to find out who they are, actually, so I can actually mention them, you know, in my book, in my next book, and see how they feel. But so there is that. But again, you know, it's also understanding that they're a different generation as well. You know, things were very different, you know, to what they are now. And sometimes you've got to understand that, even though I don't agree with it, just try. And it's, you know, it's the same as some people who follow their religious beliefs. Some religious beliefs, if you're so entrenched in those religious beliefs, it's very difficult for you then to accept people being gay. Because I had a conversation with a lovely young girl a couple of years when I did a talk in a company in London, and she said, "Look, Nigel, I'm really struggling." She said, "Because if I accept gay, and I have total respect for gay people, but if I accept gay people and talk openly about it with my family, how can I then follow my religious beliefs as telling me that is wrong?" So I'm torn here with, do I have to leave my religion to be able to accept gay people, or can I not accept gay people if I want to follow my religion? So sometimes people have those struggles. It's not actually hating gay people. It's like, well, my religion tells me this, so what do I do? And the conversation I had with her was, well, look, what you have to understand is if you look at the 10 Commandments, for example, everything in those 10 Commandments is a choice. You can choose whether you break those commandments or not. You can't choose your sexuality. So I'm pretty sure if those religions, those scriptures are being written today, they would be written very differently. And you have to remember, when scriptures were written centuries and centuries ago, they were hugely influenced by people at the time who wanted to influence their way of lives on things as well. So it's having those conversations, with difficult conversations as well, and understanding why somebody finds acceptance of LGBTQ people difficult. And that's a different conversation then to have with people. So in the farming community, look, it's probably far and few between, but you just, it's the same. My dad has accepted me now, but he found it very difficult at the time, because to him this was something that was totally wrong. From his upbringing, this was something, this is not right, But then you have the conversation, he comes to understand. So now he's totally accepting it because he understands a bit more about it. And so conversations are important, and educating people around things as well. And also respecting people who may, so for example, just to finish off you quickly, when it came about equal or gay marriage, what I support 100%, of course, people weren't agreeing with gay marriage, and some people were telling me, well, look, Nigel, I agree with equality. I have no issues with two gay people getting married in a sense, but a marriage is between a man and a woman, so they need to find another name for it. It means exactly the same. I said, well, so I could understand why this person was finding it difficult to accept this, even though we didn't disagree with it. He just felt, well, can't they call it something else? I said, I don't know what you're going to call it. So it wasn't him not agreeing with it. It was, well, this is what the Bible says. This is a marriage between man and woman. So we either have to change this in the Bible, or this needs to be called something else. So, okay, I can understand where you're coming from. So conversations needed to happen then. So it's important sometimes that, you have conversations, understand where people are coming from. Okay, I respect your opinion of it, although I don't agree with you on it, but I respect that you have your opinion, although I don't agree with it. So that's hugely important in an environment of equality and diversity and inclusion as well.
I think really from what you've said all morning, that the key to, I don't know, a better work environment, better understanding, a lot of that is just about the right communication and being willing to have quite difficult conversations sometimes, and to challenge things that people say, be it your friends, your family. And a lot of that is how you communicate.
Because once you get emotionally attached, if you look at things, look at sort of political views, for example, okay, some people are so entrenched emotionally in a political view. This is my party, and I don't care how good another party is. I'm never going to say that they're good because I don't like them, or this is my political view. So they're emotionally attached then to that. They are unable then to have an open and sort of respectful, maybe, conversation about something because you're emotionally attached. So as a referee, when you're on that field, you can't get emotionally attached to the situation, to a team, to the occasion. Could be your favorite player, but I can't get emotionally attached and think that player can do nothing wrong. Well, he can. So sometimes people find it difficult to detach from that emotion. And that's then when you're not able to have these difficult conversations or these open conversations, because we just can't have this conversation with this person because his mind is made up. He's too emotionally attached. He can't see the other side of the argument. So what you may not agree with the other side of the argument. Say, well, no, I still think this is the right thing, but you need to be able to have an open conversation, understand where they're coming from. So because of probably my refereeing background, when I have a conversation, even though, I've listened to what you've got to say, you have a value point, but I disagree with you and I think this is the right decision. So I still have that view of it, but I'm not emotionally attached thinking, no, I don't care what you're going to say, this is what I'm going to do. I will listen to what somebody's got to say. Okay, I've listened to what you say, you know what, you've got a fair point, and okay, you know what, I will agree with you, or I'll meet you halfway here then because you've got a fair point. Or I will say, look, no, I'm sorry, I understand what you're saying, but no, this is the right decision for me, so this is what we're going to do. But I will have that open conversation and I will listen because I'm able then to detach myself emotionally because I'm not emotionally attached to what the decision I have to make. And that is key. Because once you have somebody, if you go into a meeting and your chairman says, I don't care what anybody's going to say today, this is what I'm going to do. He's too emotionally attached or she's too emotionally attached to that. You need to detach from that, have the conversations, and then you arrive then at your decision.
I think that that's quite a skill to develop, probably something that we're not.
It is. Yeah. And habits as well. Habits, way that you've been. Oh, sorry, I was taught to do it this way. I'm sorry, I'm not changing. It is difficult, but it is important to bring change about and create a better place, an equal place, to get better out of whatever you want to achieve. Sometimes change do need to happen, but also as well, remember as well, on the other side of the coin, sometimes change doesn't need to happen. There's no point changing things for the sake of change. Change has to actually mean that what you're changing is going to be better. If it's not, and this is where sometimes in rugby, they take quite a while, unless it's a safety issue, which is something urgent, they take a while to change something, because what they will do, they'll trial things first. It could take 3-4 years, maybe more, to trial something, because by thinking, right, we'll change this now because this will be better. But by changing that, it means that a couple of other things are not going to be better. So it has an adverse effect. So that change actually is not going to work. So that's why in rugby, when they implement change, they'll trial it first to see, right, if we do this, which we think will work, what actually will it look like? And this is where, you know, we've seen many things. You change things today, in 10 years' time, you know what, we are seeing now that the effects of this, so we need to change back. So it's important that change also takes time as well to make sure it's the right thing. On other occasions, it needs to be a bit more urgent because it's a safety issue. So change sometimes needs a lot of research, a lot of sort of dedication, and sometimes trialing things to make sure, you know what, this actually isn't going to work, and not to be afraid then to say, well, look, we did bring this change in, it's not working, we need to look at something else, and to be able to stand up and say that, yeah, look, we thought it was the right thing, but it's not. And this is where we go back to governments, for example, you know, but it's just, if you look at the Boris Johnson issue, whether you like him or dislike him, I'm just thinking to myself, why just couldn't you say, look, I'm sorry, I got it wrong. We were in an environment, we were working, yes, we had something to eat, we were chatting away, it wasn't a party, it may look like it, sorry, we got it wrong, and just said at the time, look, yeah, sorry, it won't happen again. Instead of trying to say it didn't happen, then it did happen, and then you have to go back and say, well, actually, you lied. Just sometimes, just be honest and say, look, yeah, no, we got it wrong. That's how we learn and move on.
Yes, that all sounds very sensible, and I think perhaps the NHS probably has a lot to learn from the world of rugby. I like the idea of trialing things in that way and checking on the unintended consequences of positive change, and also obviously the theme of respect. We all need that in our lives and in our workplaces. We're really running out of time now. I know you need to dip off, so there is one last question, which is what's next for Nigel Owens?
Next is another Zoom talk. No, it's well, a bit of everything, really, I guess. Obviously, the farming takes up quite a bit of time. Obviously, I do some of these talks, do some TV work, filming as well, a bit of radio work. I still work at WRU, coaching a couple of referees as well. So a bit of variety, really, which is something I'm enjoying. And obviously, we're building a new house at the farm as well. So so that's taken up a lot of time and a lot of stress, I can tell you. And on that note, before I go, can I just say how important work you all do, whatever part you play in the NHS, you all play a hugely important part. And maybe people haven't appreciated the great work that you all do there, whether it be in the front line, behind the desk, whatever you do there. But I'm sure you do appreciate that during the last 2 years, people have shown their appreciation. And a big thank you from me as well, because if it wasn't for the NHS, then I wouldn't be here today. It's as simple as that. So keep up that great work, and don't be afraid of the challenges. Don't be afraid to change. In all walks of life, in all workplaces, there are things that we can do better, even though we might not like that change. But that's how we become better at what we do as individuals and as a group as well. So whatever challenges ahead, don't be too afraid to change if need be, but also as well, don't change for the sake of change.
Thank you so much. And there is so much love being shown to you in the chat. I hope you do get a chance to see it. So all that remains for us to say is a huge thank you to you, Diolch yn fawr iawn, Nigel. Thank you all to our HPMA Cymru members for joining us and for your questions and for taking part. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at HPMA Cymru. We'd love to see your tweets about today's event. You can tag us. You can also follow Nigel at Nigel Ref Owens. And thank you all and have a great day. And I just pass over to Sian for the last word.
Bye-bye. I've got to go. Bye-bye.
Diolch.
Diolch, Hwyl, ta-ra, bye-bye.
Ta-ra. Thank you everyone for joining us. Diolch am ymuno gyda ni.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Oh, diolch yn fawr.
Thank you. Diolch.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Bye all.
Thank you.